Hey folks, gun seasons are opening up all over the country, probably already a few days into the season by the time that you see this. We're going to touch on 5 of the gun season hotspots. Now, when I say gun season, right now there are a few things in the future that we will add to this later in the season when we start talking about maybe those end of the modern gun or end of the rifle seasons going into that mid-December muzzleloader hunt, right? I'm often asked, guys, the Orange Army, you hear that, right? And I'm part of that army, I guess. I like to hunt the entire season. Am I a diehard bow hunter at heart? Yes, I am. But the gun seasons over time mean a lot to me. Family deer camps and everything else that's ties to that, especially originally being from Michigan, huge part of our life, right? I get asked that all the time, man, these gun hunts are so invasive and it chases deer out. Well, guys, gun seasons can actually be less invasive, or gun hunting in general can be less invasive if you treat it correctly. So one of the hot spots, guys, that I always like to keep an eye on this time of the year is our shot plots. Now, the shot plots, we started early season, right? We kind of focused on those early season because we're hunting a lot of PM sits. Well, the shot plot kind of goes away because of the line of travel that is sometimes unsecure that comes in to the food sources or through a shot plot and out to a food plot, right? That goes away because of the cruising mentality during the rut, the pre-rut and the rut. But at your shot plots, maybe you have and maybe you even should look at maybe setting it up this way. Maybe you have an opportunity to put a box blind in there, so when the colder temperatures come in, or if you're taking the kids with you, and I'd like to be comfortable too, right? It doesn't have to be just the kids, but I mean having a situation where you're more comfortable in that. So putting a hidden box blind on those shot plots that is strategically put, maybe it's up a little bit, that you can have your shot at the shot plot, but also look past your screening and see the end of the food plot. So like we said, guys, I don't design any of my box blinds on the food plots, but I do put them on shot plots because you can reach out and touch your food plots from, maybe it's 100 yards away. Maybe you do have one of the feeders. Maybe you got a real wood feeder out there, right? And like I do, that my rifle blinds can reach out and touch those feeders, because during this time of the year, it's going to happen. A mature buck, or of any buck of your choice, is going to get himself into trouble following those does to the feeder. So it's good to be able to reach out and cover that location if you need to, but keep in mind, you have to be in that area where you can still get out of dodge at dark and not blow those food sources, because they're still very important, even more so important this time of the year. We can't blow those does off that food plot, especially those feeders. It's all about covering those does. And with a gun, sometimes you're in that location and you can cover maybe 1 or 2 of those locations that you can't with a bow. You're on the shot plot, hence the reason it's called a shot, right? You had to be able to shoot across it. With a gun, you can cover a little more ground. So shot plots is one to keep an eye on. Your water holes this time of the year, guys. This weekend, my nephew was able to harvest his first buck with us here on the farm. His first buck, overall, he's harvested some does with me in Michigan, but it was his first buck, and it was here on the farm with me here in Kentucky. Shot a beautiful 2.5-year-old buck, and he's just happier than happy. So we've got a future deer hunter hooked there for life, I do believe. That deer came in to one of the water holes at 3 o'clock, came in, and the way he was quartered, 75 yards to the water hole, and he could not get a shot at him, and so he let him come out. He was in a box blind, and that box blind is off the end of a food plot about 75 yards. Out the left window, you can look down to see the food plot, but it's looking into the timber, into that water hole. That buck had been bedded, or was cruising through there 3 o'clock, hit the water hole, and came up the transition. He shot him at 35 yards with the gun at the licking branch on the end of the food plot, which is going to be a finished shot plot next year. So huge step there to really watch. They are running, their body heat is building, the rut is in full swing, And them water sources, guys, especially this year, now we're getting a bunch of moisture, much needed moisture. So, they're not, they're drinking a lot of different places now that they weren't before in this drought that we've been in. But the tanks are not something to look over, guys. Water sources, water holes that we're strategically putting in on these lines of travel. On that contour line, guys, that's exactly how my nephew Mac was able to shoot his buck there, and definitely something not to overlook. I've got number 3 here, guys, doe bedding overlooks. Now, this is where most of your gun hunts go south. Folks want to be in an area where you can cover a large area, right? You want to be able to reach out and touch something. Guys, I don't, in a gun situation anymore, I don't want to see 200-300 yards. I want to see the right 100 yards. I want to see the right 200 yards, right? If I can cover multiple locations, that's great. I would rather sit somewhere, to be honest with you, during the gun season, the same spot that I'm hunting with a bow, because the opportunity of seeing something is better. Just because you can see and cover a large area doesn't mean that area that you're covering makes sense, right? It doesn't mean that those deer that you're hunting right now, in their world, their mentality, when it all revolves around does, chasing, and the rut, just because you can see a lot of open fields, a lot of area, doesn't mean that they're going to be cruising that, especially in a high pressure state, guys. Remember, if your design, or if your property, your location where you're hunting, if they have to expose themselves out of these open fields, in a high pressure state especially, that's not the majority. Is it going to happen? Does it happen? Yes, it does. We all get in trouble, right? Following ladies in the wrong direction, right, wrong time of the year. We're all guilty of it, right? And it goes for the ladies as well. So you've been just as guilty following the wrong guy out in the food plot, I'm sure. So, or follow him around. So, all joking aside, though, does it happen? Yes, it does. Is it the majority? No. So that number 3, guys, is just that, doe bedding. I've got, let's see, so 3 of my box blinds, 3 of the box blinds here on the 75 acres here in Kentucky. I can see multiple reasons to be there. A lot of them I can see, to be honest with you, all of them, I can see the end of some of the food plots, I can see the feeders, but I'm behind the does. So I'm 100 yards, 200 yards out of the picture on an elevated area, on a side hill. One of my box blinds is actually walk over and it's flat. There's no stairs, but the front of it's down 4 foot legs. But I'm covering a large area that has all doe bedding potential that I've got cut in for my food plots, and I'm seeing multiple of those come into the end of that food plot, right? Or going out into that food plot. You have to make sure that you're setting yourself up, catching that cruising still behind the doe bedding areas. Like I said, if your strategy, this is one of the reasons why you see me doing the doe bedding areas or designing and building doe bedding areas the way I do. If your doe bedding areas, you always are told, every video you turn in, build your doe bedding area just as close to your food plot as you can get it. That's true. That doesn't mean that the doe bedding has to touch the food plot though, right? For that reason, because we have to be able to let them bucks cruise through that area when the wind is right for us and it's right for them. And if you bring all your doe bedding right flush to your food plots, guys, you're shutting the door on them to make the wind right for when you can hunt them and they need to scent check it on that wind. So you slide the doe bedding back. The doe bedding doesn't have to be connected to the food plot. It can be within that first 100-yard rim, within that first 75-yard rim. What that does, guys, is that allows that secure line of travel in front between the food plots and the doe bedding areas to slide them through to keep that cruising mentality going. In a gun situation, you might be lucky, and I look for those in a gun situation where I can cover a couple of those. So make it make sense why you're there. Not just, hey, I can cover a lot of area, right? You have to be covering the right area. This time of the year, guys, is AM ties 4 and 5 together. AM contour, being above the line of travel. it's kind of a catch-22, right? You've got to be able to be in the dense area. So if it's dense, sometimes you can't see over. But if you're in hill country, you can cover the one that you're above. You can look across 200-300 yards, cover that one too. So those AM cruising sets up that all-day movement that we're going to talk about here in number 5. That is a way to cover it. So don't put yourself in an area that you're just covering a 50-yard window with a high-powered rifle or a shotgun or a muzzleloader that you can reach out and touch. Cover a couple of those. Leave your options open a little bit. Know that going into that, can I cover more of those lines of travel than just one? Number 5 is this: deep interior all-day sits. One of the best hot spots to cover with a gun, or one of the best strategies that you can do during a gun season, especially in a high pressured state, or if you're hunting a family farm where there's going to be some pressure, maybe more pressure than there was before during the bow season. One of the best ways to be successful, guys, during the gun season is go in to the deep dark timber, go interior of that farm. And the reason for that is this, guys: if there's a time that you want to go interior and you want to get real up close personal in the interior of the farm, you'll find is those areas sometimes right now, there's a lot of good going on interior properties that we're not seeing from the outside, because of the fact that your does are pressured off your food sources. Your does are getting bumped every time somebody comes in across the ag in the morning, or you have to look interior. What I've done, I just actually did this last week with a gentleman out of Indiana, kind of giving him some tips on a farm that, he was up there hunting. I look around at the surrounding pressure. Where is everybody coming in? Where the neighbors are going to drive across the field? Where are their box blinds out in the middle of the fields? Find out where all that pressure, all them hedgerow, fence rows tie into your huntable area, whether it's public ground or private ground. Where are the exit routes for those deer, does? Where are they going to go? Where are they all going to go when they're blown out? What you'll find, guys, is now on my farm, it's unpressured, right? On maybe your farm that you've set it up, you're unpressuring your doe bedding areas, so maybe your doe bedding areas aren't changing. But in a high pressured state or a big farm setting, you'll find is you can't control everybody else's movements, right? So they're going in, pushing deer. Those does are going to bed, maybe not in the habitat that was holding them up before on those food sources. They're going to go farther back in the inside of the property, and that's where you need to be. Get in there early. Get in there, maybe an hour and a half before daylight instead of a half hour. Get in there deep. Cover a large area, be in the right spot, but all that activity from all that pressure coming into those locations, the bucks are going to follow, and they are going to scent check those areas, and it's a all-day situation. Go in there and get internal, and then you stay there. You go in the dark, you're going to come in, you're going to come out in the dark. You have to know going into that. Now weather and everything else plays into that, right? You got to be able to dress warm and be able to combat that, or be comfortable, combat that weather with some good gear. But when you're interior, those guys, like I said, right now can be the time to do that. Now, do I recommend doing that, or do I recommend that strategy if it's a farm where we know the does are on pressure, your food plot programs are strong? Do I recommend diving into the center of that? I do not. But if it's pressure related, if it's a public ground situation, one of the biggest, probably the biggest hot spot during a gun season to look at, guys, is where all the pressure is driving all of that interior, all that stuff interior, more secluded areas than they were before. The does are going to go down in there a little bit further. The bucks are going to follow, and they're going to be in there dissecting that all day long. So something to not overlook. Just remember, if you're going to go in there, you got to have a entrance and an exit plan, just like you do earlier in the season. And most of the times that turns into an all-day situation. 5 gun spots, guys, that really jump out to me that I think will, could help you be very successful this gun season. As we go on, there's some more strategies coming down the road here tied to gun hunts. When we get later in the season, when the rut starts to trickle down in some of the seasons. So if you're watching this in the south, advance it a couple weeks. If you're watching this from the Midwest or from Michigan or here in Kentucky, it's happening right now, right? So later in the season though, we start adding in some of those more food direct spots where they go back to survival, not so much about the breeding pressure of the year, guys. 5 ways to be successful during the gun hunts, guys. Be safe. First and foremost, be safe. Enjoy it. Have fun. And by all means, guys, now is the time of the year to introduce somebody new to hunting, such as we did here this weekend. He's been hunting with me for a couple of years, and we finally had the opportunity to get him on a buck, guys. And this is the time to bring one of those new hunters to the plate. Get the wives, get the kids, the girlfriends, a buddy that hasn't hunted before. Get them in the woods, guys. We need hunters. Now is the time to introduce them. Have fun, but like I said, most important, teach safety before you teach anything else. Enjoy it, and stay warm. We got some cold temperatures sweeping across the nation here. Thanks, guys.